Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Blitz Growth. Super excited to have Chris out here today. There's going to be some amazing stuff that we cover here, so don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment or a review if you're loving Blitz Growth. But to introduce our amazing guest, Chris is a keynote speaker and author. Got some amazing growth hacking and marketing content to share. So there's a little bit of branding. He's worked with amazing companies like ING, Cisco, KPMG, HelloPrint, and he's going to go over these 7 growth levers that he covers in his book and how he's been using these with companies and consulting and growing these brands in amazing ways. So we're going to dive in, find what that 1% growth lever is to 2x your business. So tune in and take some notes because a lot of this will be applicable to your businesses, and really excited to have Chris here. So thanks for joining, Chris.
Thanks, Jack. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So, Chris, give us a little elevator pitch. How do you describe what you do and how you help people? What's the real value add pitch that you give people when you first meet them?
Sure. Well, I believe that there is in every business a hidden gold mine of growth that's in front of you. But I know that a lot of companies don't see it. And if they see it, they don't know how to extract the gold. And I think that to say it modestly, that's one of my superpowers. And that's what I really love to do every day.
Nice. And I know growth hacking is so vague, and marketing is a gray area of where it starts and begins. But what sort of work have you done in the past that kind of led you to teaching companies how to put together these growth tactics, how to grow, and then how do you kind of differentiate growth hacking or growth marketing to just like marketing? How do you kind of like sell that more extreme and exciting version of marketing?
Yeah, sure. Well, it was a long journey with a lot of scar tissue, as I can tell you. Started out as an auditor at KPMG, hated my job so much that I decided to quit after 1 year. Started my first startup, completely failed within 1 year. So those were 2 very successful years. Lost a lot of money. But then I've always learned that if you want to be successful, you need to figure out who has already done it and what you can learn from them. And that was the time that growth hacking was really getting traction in the US. And I'm based in the Netherlands. And at that moment, I thought, okay, they did something very smart over there. Can I learn from that? So I decided to completely immerse myself in the field and started a growth agency with 2 business partners. They already owned a digital agency, so that was really helpful. Because of that, we had access to a lot of different companies. And so I could test all the things I learned online through courses, through books, in a lot of different contexts. So I can definitely say that I've tried a lot of things, especially in the early years. Not many things worked. So I've also learned what you shouldn't do, but also what are the pitfalls and how you can circumvent those, and what are the things that actually make an impact. And what I'm also trained in is, because companies hire you to make an impact, and we were working on retainer, which means that if we weren't helping them to grow, they wouldn't pay us anymore. So in that sense, like, I've really learned to spot where growth is, because I knew that if they would grow, I would get paid. And when you only get paid when you kill, well, then you learn really fast, as my mentor Jay Abraham would say.
Nice. That's really cool. And so you started that agency with 2 co-founders. And what were you mainly doing for the growth of that? And then what worked the best when you started working with brands and you came in, you ordered their company, you looked at growth areas? What were the common growth areas you guys would specialize in? And what kind of growth tactics do you think worked the best in growing those companies? And also maybe what was the niche of the companies?
Yeah, so I think it was a pretty broad spectrum of clients that we helped. So that was really interesting. The thing was, like, my 2 co-founders owned that digital agency. So in a lot of cases, the context where we would come in is that clients would approach us and tell us, like, hey, we need a new website. And instead of just creating a website, we asked the question, okay, but why do you want it? Like, what are your ambitions? What are your goals? And out of that, you come to some kind of analysis on, like, where are the opportunities? And to be honest, in a lot of cases, the low hanging fruit is really easy. Just basic solid zero stuff, really nailing the value proposition, really understanding what type of customers you want to target. And this is also something that I now see in a lot of my consulting engagements that I do right now, because last year I sold my agency. And what I see with a lot of clients that ask me, like, where should we grow? I always ask them, they're asking level 12 questions while they haven't mastered level 5 yet. So I see that in a lot of companies, there's a lot of growth possible, but just starting with the basics and do them really, really well. But at the other end, like these basic things of following up, making sure the infrastructure is right, that's boring. It's not sexy. And that's
Mm-hmm.
always the challenge with growth hacking. People really think it's the shiny objects, the tools, the cool stuff. But if you really want to make an impact, you can't do the cool and shiny stuff if the basics aren't there yet.
Yep. I 100% agree. Okay. And so what sort of things would you recommend for brands kind of just getting started and looking at this growth trajectory? We've got understanding the customer, maybe doing some avatars, that sort of thing. What else did you usually, implement or suggest to brands who were looking to, master level 12 before level 1?
I would say that a very underrated area is also positioning. So the question is, if you serve a certain niche or you solve a certain problem for them, they also have like 10 other options on what they can do to get that problem solved. So the question is like, how are you different? What makes you unique? So a lot of people in growth hacking talk about like cool tactics, but I've seen that if you also take the positioning into consideration, that really makes a very big impact. And I'm a very big fan of the concepts from the book, The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, which basically states is you need to be the first in mind within a category. And this is where people need to pay very good attention to, because if the category is already filled with different companies, that means it's really hard and really expensive to get also into that category. So what you do at that point, you create a new category. And if you're really smart and strategic about that, by when you're launching a new company, you're also creating a new category, like that will fast track you in your growth trajectory.
Yeah. And so obviously niching down is super important in this case. Um, are there any tips on how someone can niche down? So like how should they think about niching down? So I know people always look at the size of the market and like, yeah, I just want 1% of that $100 billion market and it's going to be great. But what do you think founders should actually do to discover where they should niche down?
I think it's a broad question. So let me see how I can answer that in the best way possible. So when I start out with companies and when I launch new things myself, the first thing that I'm looking at is like, who are the crazy ones that are actually throwing money at me at first. So in other words, who is crazy enough to just like, okay, give it a shot and see where it happens. Start from there. Start from there. Who are those people? How are they describing what you're doing? And I believe that there's a lot of gold in how your first customers are describing what you're doing, because we can sit in a room, have countless workshops, discuss what we could do, how we would position ourselves, but it's positioning in the eyes of the market. And if you don't listen to the market, it's impossible to find the exact positioning. So that's where I would start. Like, who are the first crazy ones to buy from you? Start from like, what's the pain that we want to solve? What's the result, the outcome that the clients want to achieve? How do they perceive the mechanism that we bring in? And how are they describing it? And out of that, I would choose the positioning for the first period, because like you will also evolve over time.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that people don't understand is they need to start in a smaller niche, and then as they get more and more success, they expand the size of the niche that they're in, or they jump onto a complementary niche that they can also service.
Yeah,
So those are really good points. And so, how do you suggest brand owners get this information? Like talking to like every business owner should do it. They should talk to their customers and all that sort of stuff, but very few actually do it. Are there any kind of tactics that you've used over the years? Because obviously, collecting data is super important in what you do with companies. Is there any ideas or examples or tactics you've used to collect information, talk to customers? What's the best way that brands can do that?
So I think the key thing is also to understand why don't they talk to their customers? What are they afraid of? And what I've seen with growth is that real accelerated growth is at the opposite side of discomfort. And you see that with people not following up, not getting out there. So you really need to be aware. Okay, where's my discomfort? Do I have an imposter syndrome or something like that? Because if you know that if you can go to the other side of that, that's where real growth is, and that's where you will see that you will be passionate about talking to people. And I think that another framework that Jay Abram uses, which I'm a very big fan of, is like you shouldn't be falling in love with your product, but you should fall in love with your customer. So you should really think to yourself, if you don't go out there to talk to your customers, like I know a lot of different type of clients that I would never work with because they don't spark my energy. But I know that I'm very energized by people who come to me and say, you know what, Chris, we tried all these things. We know we're stuck. We need help. Like people who are in that state of mind, who already have something established or who are really ambitious, but know that they need somebody to accelerate them. Like that's my market. Those people I love working with. But also at the other side, there are a lot of clients or prospects that I don't work with because I'm very, very strict. If after a meeting I don't have more energy than before the meeting, like I'm not going to work with you.
Wow. Okay.
So in that
So
sense,
also,
it's also important that you know where to focus on.
so it's also, being very selective at the start about maybe the customers or clients that you take or work with. No, super interesting. Because I think at the start it's hard because a lot of brand owners are like, no, I want as many customers or clients as possible because I want that revenue. So it's kind of hard for them to maybe pull back sometimes and be like, no, I need to actually like think about this and niche down to the customers that I really want to have or the clients that I really want to work with.
Yeah, so I think in my book, I've described this as every level has a growth devil. So when you start out, you need to say yes to everything. But there will be a point where you need to transition to starting no, to start say no more. So when I started with my growth agency, the first engagement that I sold was 100 hours of consulting for 10 euros per hour. So I had 1K. I sold 1K for 100 hours of consulting. I now charge 5K per day. And I'm probably going to double my price next year. And it's because I've learned along the way what works and what doesn't.
Got it. So would you give any advice to business owners on when they should start saying no? Because, you could keep doing that forever. And I think that's how a lot of people get burnt out. They, say yes to everything and they just stretch themselves too thin. When do you think as a business owner, whether it's an e-commerce store, an agency, or you're a content creator, when do you think is a good time to start saying no to opportunities?
Yeah, I think this might sound as a more like spiritual answer, and there's a saying is like you can only get something of a higher nature if you release something of a lower nature. And how does that apply to growth in your question? If you really feel that something is slowing you down, so there are more appealing clients, you feel that you could go out more, but you have this nagging thing that keeps bothering you, like those are very subtle signals that you should probably be outsourcing or automating or delegating or doing something else, that you don't do that thing anymore, but you can focus your time on higher level stuff. And this is a trajectory where I see so many people struggle to stop doing things and accelerate more on things with impact. And I see it especially with business owners who have a portfolio of different businesses. So I have a set of clients that I guide, and especially this morning, I had a guy. He owns an agency. He has 2 startups, and I basically told him, you know what? If you focus your attention over there, these 2 other things will not grow. Well, at the other end, if he would focus his focus on one thing, That will actually make everything else easier. And especially in a portfolio context where you have to kill your darlings, that's really challenging for a lot of business owners.
Yeah, I think it definitely is, because you play this game of wanting to diversify and take on all these other opportunities, but you also know deep down that, if you diversify too much, then nothing will grow. And you kind of just flatline, trying to do too many things at once. But no, it's super interesting. Um, would you have any tips on what founders and business owners in the early stages, so, maybe first year, maybe making less than $50,000 or euro a year, any things that they should avoid when getting started with their business?
Oh, definitely. It's like I'm a very big fan of pre-selling. And what do I mean with that? Is you need to sell it before you've created it. And I've made the mistake myself to be like creating something for a full year, spending hundreds and hundreds of K of costs to create something that nobody wanted. So I now flipped it around completely. First, we try to sell it, and once we've sold it, we're like, okay, how are we going to deliver this? But that's actually a good problem because you can buy yourself out of that. And for example, I had a client and they thought, okay, we want to do coaching for high potential, like new people in corporates. So like the trainee layer. And they were like, oh, should we create like a business model canvas? And should we do this? And should we do that? I was like, no, like this problem is there. You've got these people in your network. Call them, send them a message, and that you will give them 4 hours of coaching for €100. And they were like, what are we gonna do? Doesn't matter. Send that message. Within 31 minutes, they had their first client. If I wouldn't push them into that direction, for 6 months, they probably wouldn't have had any revenue. But because they started selling, once you've sold something, you also need to deliver it. So start with selling, then you're building it, and out of that, you can iterate to a profitable model.
Got it. And then what's some tactics or ways to sell something before you create it? Like, how would someone go about doing that, whether it's an e-commerce store or consulting business or whatever type of business it would be? What's the path of least resistance for selling something before creating it?
So the thing you should create is the written sales material. And what do I mean with that? Is that if you had a conversation with somebody, you try to write a sales page. So what I do for that is like I use a Google Doc. I write down like, hey, this is your pain. You told me this, and this would be the way on how I would solve it. Then I ask them on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely would you be to buy it right now? And if they tell me a 7, I would ask them, okay, what would make it a 10? Or what is not making it a 10? And by constantly iterating that, you can at some point show people a landing page or a Google Doc. And based on that, they say, you know what, give me that. So that's where I would always start because you go from one on one consulting or selling. And the most scalable way of selling is if you can use the internet, if you can use written materials or videos or something like that. But the mistake that a lot of people make is write the sales material, create the videos before they really understand what triggers people and in what form they need to shape it, what the objections are. And that's what you can learn in a one on one setting. So that's why I'm always a big fan of pre selling to learn those objections, to really get into that game. Out of that, you create your sales material, your written pieces, your videos. And you know, if you scale that, that will be very profitable.
Got it. And then for getting those conversations, is it just cold calling? Is it building an email list, building a social following? How do you get those first few conversations to craft that value proposition and, service or product that you are eventually going to sell to them?
Yeah. So I'm always starting with a layered approach. And what do I mean with that? Is first start with your own network. Because you should also ask yourself, should you start a business in an area where you don't know anybody? You could do it, but it's probably not the smartest way to do it. So I always try to see, okay, who is in your network? Because they can either help you or they can introduce you to people that they know and start from there. And of course, you have frameworks like the top 20 list or the Dream 100 and other frameworks which you can use to also leverage other people's network. But that's where I would start. Like, what's your own network? and just like sending out that message, and you will be surprised by how many people actually want to help you.
Interesting. No, it's great. And I think, with LinkedIn and all that sort of stuff now, it's very easy to find people in your network in the niche that you're interested in. I think they've made the barrier to entry for introductions so low now. But yeah, unfortunately, it does get a bit spammy.
Yeah, but that's the thing. What do I like? I have another client right now, and they created a mastermind experience, like sales tickets of like more than 10K per seat. They didn't have any experience with that, but because we took this approach, like within 6 weeks, they had filled 10 slots. Because what they do is they looked at the LinkedIn profiles, they looked at the type of person, and they were assessing how can we add value. Because if you make it tailored and you start to think from their perspective, what would what would be the best for them, what's in it for them, and start from there, you will see that you can actually differentiate yourself pretty easy, because people are lazy, they just spam. So especially the higher you go in terms of service, the higher the level, the more they want to see that nuanced approach. And if you do that in a smart way, that will make a lot of impact.
Okay, super interesting. And then getting a bit more into your experience, who are the main types of companies that you work with? And then what differentiates the successful ones versus the unsuccessful ones? Like, what are some traits that you see in those guys that, the successful ones have in common?
Yeah. So I think that also went into a trajectory. So years ago, when we had the agency, we would basically first sell our services to everybody who would throw money at us. So that would be e-commerce, fintech, all types of companies. And the journey I'm on right now is because like I've built up an agency, I've sold it. There are a lot of like agency owners that want to speak to me and want to get consulting, because I know how to structure their agency in a smart way, but also how to sell the services and these things. But actually, what differentiates the successful ones from the unsuccessful ones, I would say decisiveness. So people that are now hiring me, they're really decisive. They make a yes or no commitment in the first meeting. They get things done, especially if you're in a like coaching session or consulting session where every week you meet each other. And if you don't execute on the things that we discuss, it's not going to happen. So the main trait is like, do you take action? And out of that, do you also understand that probably half of what we think is not going to work? But the key thing is, do you learn from these things? Are you doubling down on the things that work, but are you also learning from the things that don't work? Because don't stop after 2 or 3 failures, but probably after 6 or 7 times, you will have found that golden nugget, which will pay for everything else you tried before.
Yeah, well, I saw a super interesting post on Indie Hackers this week where it was a guy who launched 70 different projects slash startups, and he was monitoring, the success rate of these. And I think out of the 70, I think only 3 of them actually made more than a few $100s of revenue. So yeah, it was just really showing that you need to test and ship so many things before you find the one thing that works. And I think you are right. It's, same with investing. All of these software investors, people buying up all these SaaS companies or investing in these SaaS companies, they know they need to acquire like 100 to find, 1 or 2 that's going to actually work, or invest in 100 to find 1 or 2 that actually work. So I think that applies to anything that you're doing with your testing, whether it's your testing your market, questioning your customers, all that sort of stuff. I think it's super valuable point that you make.
Yeah, definitely.
Next question I had was, okay, so you're a very successful consultant. You're helping a lot of brands, and your hourly rate is obviously at a really good spot. Why do you think you're really successful at that? And there's thousands of these consultants still trying to, find clients or still trying to increase that rate above, $100 an hour sort of thing. Why do you think you're so successful and the other ones maybe are not?
So I think the other ones, there are a lot. I think that from a technical perspective, so if you look at digital marketing, SEO, Facebook advertising, all these type of things, there are so many experts who are 100 times better at it than I am. 100%. Like I don't doubt that. But these people undervalue what they bring to the table. I actually have a friend who was working with a big bank for a year, and because of his work, the bank made 80 million in extra revenue. So that's 80. He was still charging 120 euros an hour. Like, so the key thing is like he brought 80 million. If you would told that company, you know what, my day rate is now going to be 10K per day, like a rational person from the other side would say, okay, sure, that's no problem. But if he would say that, there would be a chance of losing that consulting gig. And I think that one of the things that I do differently is that I'm willing to step away when people don't see the value that I bring. And another thing that I think that I do is that I assess if somebody pays me 5K per day, can I 10x my fee? Can I 10x the impact or more that I'm bringing that day? So if they pay me 5K, they should make at least 50K. And if I don't see that that's possible, I'm not going to charge that amount. I'm probably going to be a little bit lower if I like working with them. But I always start from a value-based perspective. What's the value that I'm bringing? Um, and I also noticed something with my own work and with my own energy is that if I have to stay somewhere for like 40 hours per week, like I get completely energy drained. What my brain is trained on, like from the early days, from when I was a child, is how can I shortcut things? How can I get quicker from A to B? And the thing is, you don't need a lot of time to do that. So what I tell people is I only need 1 or 2 or 3 hours, but in those hours, I can deliver a lot of impact. So that's why I charge higher hourly rates because I'm also done quicker. So at the end, in a lot of cases, the out-of-pocket cost to work with me is actually cheaper compared to a lot of other consultants who maybe charge 100 or 200 euros per hour.
Yeah, I think having a value-based pricing is super important, and it's interesting. So 10x is your number. You're like, okay, I need to deliver that 10x value, and then I can charge that amount.
Yeah, definitely. And so if you start from the value that you're bringing, if somebody says no to the offer that you're making, it's like they are actually stealing from themselves. It's like you're bringing more impact than they are bringing to you. And I think it's also making a conscious choice on where you're going to focus on. And I've really, I've taken an assessment with myself. I've asked myself, okay, what do I want to do for the next 25 years? What's going to be the common theme of that? And at the end, I want to have my own investment fund, like have a lot of different companies. And what's the thing that I will always be doing is go into a situation, assess it, see and spot the growth opportunities, and then tell them, you know what? Let's talk in 2 weeks. So I've decided and commitment that's going to be my superpower, and that's where I'm going to focus on for at least 25 years.
Interesting. So having clear set goals. Okay, I was just going to start wrapping it up. But a few things I wanted to ask you. So I saw that you had like this cheat sheet put together. I think that you must hand out and that sort of thing. So what's included in this cheat sheet, and where can people get it?
So this is the growth lever cheat sheet with which I created a little bit more than a year ago with my wife, who's also very long already in marketing. And what we figured out is that there are only a small amount of actions that you do that actually deliver a lot of impact. So everybody knows the Pareto principle, where, for example, 20% of your customers generate 80% of your revenue. But what if you would drill down that to the extreme and you do that a couple of times? So you take 80-20 of 80-20 and you do that 3 times, you will figure out that less than 1% of your customers are actually making more than 50% of your revenue. So what if you would focus only on those type of customers or solve on those type of actions that make an impact? So that's what we've been doing. So figuring out like which are growth levers that could be implemented in a lot of different contexts. And that's what we worked on for a couple of months after my exit. We shipped it, created an entire challenge around that, and that was very successful. And out of that, I got approached by a publisher for a book deal where I've created now a book with all kinds of evergreen principles, like this way of thinking, even more drilled down. And instead of people having me to pay 5K per day for like 30 euros, they can read the book and they can download at least the essential parts of that brain and follow that approach. So I try to make it very approachable and applicable for a lot of people. So yeah, and that's also been a very challenging and interesting project that I've worked on in the last year.
Yeah, we've interviewed a few people with books, and it does seem like a lot of work. But how come you decided to go down the book route as opposed to? I know we got introduced from Mara, who we interviewed a few weeks ago, but going down the book route instead of the course route. There's like a big divide right now between how you deliver knowledge and information, and I think I think there's values to both. But how come you decided book over course?
It's the perception of the market, and my goal was to go more premium, and I've been speaking around the world for a couple of years, and what you see is that you will hit a certain threshold of speaker fees that you can ask, unless you have been a best-selling author. You have your own book. I'm lecturing at different business schools right now, and I see that my grades are actually higher now that I'm like standing there and be like, "Hey, this is my book," and it's perception in the eyes of the market. Like you could create an amazing course for $2,000, but people will actually perceive you more as an expert when you can show a book.
Super interesting. Yeah. But anyway, just to wrap it up, Chris, where can we find out more about you, more about your tactics, teaching, keynotes, all your books? Where can we find out more, and how can people possibly work with you, or how can you possibly help them?
So definitely the best way to contact me is on LinkedIn. So Chris Out. You can also go to chrisout.com, but also for my new book, which is called Structuring for Extreme Revenue Growth. We've created a website, extremerevenuegrowth.io, where people can find all kinds of information, get access to the book bonuses. An entire online platform is also added. So if you buy the book, you also get that. It's available on Amazon and all kinds of different countries. So yeah, extremerevenuegrowth.io, or contact me on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to help, because either I make a lot of money on a client, or I help them to get karma. And I'm always willing to help people who have the same passion and who have big goals.
You need those karma points just as good as money in most cases.
Definitely. They're even more important.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Blitz Growth. Make sure to like, share, leave a review or a comment saying how much you enjoyed listening to Chris and all of his tactics today. Really appreciate your time, and we'll see you next week for our next episode. But Chris, thank you so much for joining. It was a super valuable episode, and I think listeners got a lot out of it.
Thanks, Jack.
Hey guys, we put a bunch of effort into making great content for this YouTube channel, so please hit subscribe, leave us a comment, hit like, and tell a few friends about it.